I had to... There we go. All right, so here we go. Great, looks like I am on the ball. All right, so welcome everyone to Wednesday Reflection. It's been a while since we've been able to meet like this, and that's for a couple of reasons. Um, we had I was out of town last week. There were some travel arrangement or some. Oh, excuse me. I had some travel with, or not some travel, but some appointments with my family, and some other ministerial things. And so Wednesdays, I pre-recorded a few of these, but I am live here with you now. And so today's reflection is on pilgrimage. And the reason I felt compelled to talk about this today was because with the travel that my family and I have been able to do this summer, I was thinking about what pilgrimage means, especially because last week I was up in Mont Tennessee, which, if you don't know, is a very special area of the country for me. Mont is a small town on the top of kind of the crest of the Cumberland Plateau before you go off into the valley, and it's sort of the peak of that part of the Cumberland Plateau when it comes through Tennessee, and so it's really windy, it's twisty. Johnny Cash famously wrote a song called Mont Eagle Mountain, which is about the dangerous trucking that comes along, which is true. There is some pretty steep downgrade, and it is a rather hazardous part of I-24 for truckers. It is not uncommon to see runaway trucks on the runaway truck ramps. Anyway, point being is that, but there's a place called Mont Eagle, and then right next door to Mont Eagle is Swanee, which is where I attended undergrad and where I was in seminary, but also... excuse me, is also a place where I would go to very frequently as a youth and go rock climbing and caving and hiking and stuff like that. So the Swanee area was important to me before I even knew I wanted to go to college there. So it was just a very important place. And so... going to Swanee, or going to Mont Eagle this past week and working there and getting to enjoy not just the sights of the rocks and the carved out mountains as the highway goes through, or to cross Lake Nickajack and see the beautiful lake set amongst the hills, it felt really, really good. It was a good recharge for me. As well as for my wife, Emily. And it made me think about the importance of going to places. And not just places that you're familiar with, but places that are brand new. And so, for me, going to Swanee this week was a very efficient way to... Every time I start talking, because I haven't talked all morning, I have to stretch my jaw before I do these, because I start yawning. So my point is that I got a lot out of the trip, and it made me think about the idea of pilgrimage in general. So throughout history, the idea of going to a special place, a place of power, let's say, a place of cultural, religious significance, has been a part of the walk of the faithful. Of course, this is not unique to Judeo-Christian belief. it's not special to the Abrahamic religions. It is a part of human experience of religion. And so I'm not, of course, claiming any special. I'm not making any special claims about my faith and pilgrimage. It's a part of just the act of being faithful. I think involves some pilgrimage. But here are some of my thoughts and my experiences with the act of going as a prayer. A couple weeks ago, I talked about intentionality and how in a monastic situation, you are doing chores around your house or monastery. And that can include picking up after people, doing dishes, cleaning the restrooms, things like that. But even that tedious labor, even that common domestic chore, can become an act of prayer. It's like a prayer with your hands. You are waking up intending to, clean the restrooms to honor your brothers and sisters in the community. You're doing it as an act of prayer, an act of love. And so you are doing joyful work with your hands because there is an intention behind it. And the exact same thing translates into pilgrimage. You are praying with your feet as you walk or as you travel. And there's something to be said for going to special places, whether they are historically or theologically special, or just you pick a destination and say, this is where I'm going to go. As a longtime youth minister, when I moved to a new parish or started a new year, I always thought it was very helpful to either introduce or sort of reintroduce myself to the youth group after, every academic year is basically a whole new world in youth ministry. It's important to go to places with a youth group. So if you have a brand new crop of kids or you're the new youth minister in town, one of the best things to do is say, load up in a passenger van and drive to this place, which doesn't have to be far away. It could be, a short distance away, but the whole point is not the actual activity you're doing. It's the road. It's getting on the road. Case in point, our youth here at Redeemer are going on a canoe trip on Saturday to the Okatoma next to Hattiesburg, or north of Hattiesburg. Is it that no one has ever experienced canoeing or kayaking in a river before? No, I know some of our people going have done this before, this exact same trip. But it's the journey, not the destination, that matters. And that is totally cliche, but it is totally true. That's why it's a cliche. And so we go to places because the journey matters. If you've ever walked a labyrinth, if you've ever seen those ancient medieval designs where it's one path, it's not a maze that has you splitting off in different directions and that you try to solve the puzzle because you don't want to get lost. It's not one of those at all. A medieval labyrinth is a prayer device, a symbolic pilgrimage where you have a single path that runs and kind of serpentines on itself so that you are compressing a very long walk into a short space, and you walk this labyrinth and you get to the center, and then you pray, and then you walk out. And that whole meditation is a prayer or a meditation or a time of contemplation, using your feet. And kineticists and neurologists have shown that the act of moving and the act of walking stimulates your brain in a way that sitting still would never do. That is why a lot of creative folk, when they have writer's block or they're stumped or they want to figure out the next phase or move of their creative endeavor, will either get up and pace around the room, or might even just something as simple as shifting the balance of their feet, rocking on their feet. It helps. So the act of moving helps your brain. And so walking a labyrinth, walking the Camino in Spain, hiking the AT along the eastern United States. Those are great ways to pray because you are putting some miles under your feet. Even here, walking to the post office, I tend to not drive to the post office or like go on, as I'm coming to and from work. I actually make a point of driving over here, parking, then walking back toward the post office because I enjoy the walk. I also enjoy walking to work, unless I know I'm going to have to be getting in the car to pick up my little one later in the day. I usually, if I know that I'm not really bound to my car today, I will try to walk to the church. One, it's healthy, it's, saves gas, it helps the environment, but also just it gives me good space to pray. And anyway, so there's the walking aspect of it, or the traveling aspect of it. Again, who hasn't had a really good session of thinking to yourself while you're driving along the highway? So there's not just the contemplative aspect of pilgrimage, even though that is, I would say, probably my favorite part of it. There's also, so that journeying aspect is important. Again, for the contemplation, but also for the fact that you are setting aside that time, to make something holy, to make something sanctified. To be holy literally means to set it aside. So it's not just for normal everyday purpose or common purpose. It is set aside for a special reason. So if you're going to pilgrimage somewhere, if you're going to travel somewhere for a special purpose, that is time that you're setting aside to do the praying, the contemplation, the introspection, the listening to God's call. It is a special carved out time just for that purpose. And so the walking or the driving or the traveling that you would do for pilgrimage is special because it's not the traveling or walking or driving that you would do just in your common everyday life. And I said that the destination doesn't really matter. That's, true, but also not true. Because the journeying, the traveling is important. But also when the destination, when you get there, can be very important, whether it is a special place or in the, the Okatoma River is, I would say, a fairly common public place. It's not, Canterbury or the Holy Land or some, or the Grand Canyon. It's not a destination place in the same way. But the idea of traveling for prayer and worship is all throughout our scriptural experience. Genesis and the Old Testament talk about, Adam and Eve traversing the Garden of Eden, but also talk about the expulsion from the Garden of Eden and how they are traveling. And there are profound implications of their travel. But that's even more of an exile. After Cain murders Abel, he is set to walk the earth, and yet is given a mark of protection. And so there is a power to the wilderness aspect of the travel. The Israelites travel through the wilderness in Exodus. Moses encounters the bush in the wilderness. Jesus goes into the wilderness to be with God and to be tempted. But it's not that the wilderness or the travel is a punishment. No, in fact, if anything, it is a restorative act. It is a what do they call it when rehabilitative act. So it can serve as any of those kinds of remedies. It can help rehabilitate you. It can help restore you. It can help renew your sense of self and your relationship with God. The Jerusalem itself is set up as a historical pilgrimage site. So we hear in Scripture about the people of Jerusalem, or sorry, I should say the people of God, God's covenant people, the Israelites, traveling to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover or the festival of weeks or the festival of booths. We'd hear in the early Gospels about Jesus or Joseph and Mary having to travel to the city of David, Bethlehem, so that Joseph can be counted as a member of the house of David. Even though that's a secular tax thing, the importance of journeying to a place is evident. In fact, if you think of in the Psalms, there's a whole, there's different categories of Psalms. There's Psalms of praise, Psalms of lament, and then there's some Psalms that are Psalms of ascent. And they're talking about how pilgrims who would be traveling into Jerusalem would be ascending to Mount Zion, Jerusalem. And so these were Psalms that were typically said as pilgrims traveled and they ascended to Holy Mount Zion, where the temple is. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. This is the reason why the Psalm 134 that we see in Compline is my favorite. Just because it touches my heart when I pray it, especially at night. And it says, "Behold now, bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord. You that stand by night in the house of the Lord, lift up your hands in the holy gates and bless the Lord who made heaven and earth, bless you out of Zion." And it is a prayer for pilgrims. It is a psalm, a prayer, a song that pilgrims would say, praying for the keepers of the gates at Jerusalem. Those guards who would literally walk the wall, the top of the wall, guarding and keeping watch for Jerusalem. Those people who literally worked the gates. And that therein reminds me of that other prayer in Compline that let us remember that our common life depends upon each other's toil, that there are those who are working while we sleep and vice versa, and those who are sleeping while we do our work, so that everyone is taken care of. That is part of pilgrimage. And so you can pilgrimage to the Okatoma. You can pilgrimage to Natchez. Or you can pilgrimage to Port Gibson to see that church that has the finger pointing up. But you could also pilgrimage to Canterbury, like in the Canterbury Tales. Or you could pilgrimage to the Holy Land, Jerusalem. I was blessed to be able to do that in 2010. I flew to Jerusalem and so spent 10 days both in Israel and in Jordan, and got to experience some very holy places. Side note, if you do ever get a chance to go to the Holy Land, do it. You will read the Bible completely differently for the rest of your life. It makes it real in a way that your pictures and imagination never could. And with the advent of the internet, we can Google and Wikipedia articles and pictures and video of all these sites in the Bible. So like I had no real good reference for what Israel looked like. I in my head imagined like sand. And that's it is true. That is a very arid part of the world. There are a lot of rock and dust and you know, beige and brown colors, but there's also a lot of water and life, and green. And so to see these holy sites that are described in the Bible makes it real, and you read the Bible so differently. Likewise, if you go to, let's say, Rome, I've never been, but if you go to Rome, you'll see the churches and the places of, I would say places of power, places that have been imbued with the faith of thousands and thousands of people, again and again over generations, over millennia. Stonehenge, I would say, would be a place of power. The Grand Canyon is a place of power when you see it. And so travel to those places, whether it is a religious pilgrimage or maybe an ancestral pilgrimage. I was able to go to Scotland to, I didn't go to the exact town where my family is from, but I was in the neighborhood, and that was beautiful. I went to Iona, which is a place of historic Christianity in the British Isles, and that island, it just vibrates with spiritual energy, with the presence of God. The veil is thin there, just as in the Holy Land. The veil is thin in Iona, as well as in Israel. So anyway, that is just a thought about pilgrimage. It's not just that we go to favorite places and we reconnect with memories, if that's a place that we are fond of, like in my case, going to Tennessee. But also that there is a place, you can feel the love that is there. And that the marks of those who traveled there have left. So it's not just the destination, but it is also the journey itself. Don't forget that we walk a prayer with our feet when we take that kind of pilgrimage. You know, we put the miles either on our cars or on planes or on our feet or however we get there. The miles we move mean something. So I hope that helps put something into perspective. Thank you for sharing this time with me, and I look forward to seeing all of you in and around Redeemer, either online or here in person. A little bit of housekeeping. Tonight is our vestry meeting at 6 o'clock in the Cannon Hall. On Saturday, the youth is going to do a canoe trip, as I mentioned. We're going to go to the Okatoma. And then on Sunday is the blessing of the backpacks. And so if you are a teacher or a student, please present yourself. If you're a student, bring your backpack. If you're a teacher, bring your briefcase or what have you. And we will do a blessing for that. So I look forward for all these fun and exciting events around Redeemer. Thank you, everyone. So go out, find a pilgrimage site, or find a quiet spot in your backyard. And pilgrimage out there and have your coffee and be alone with God. I pray for blessings on you all as we wrap up this summer and start a new academic year. God bless.